With this movie, we begin a new section on animation. Specifically in this movie, we will be covering keyframe best methods. Animation, simply put, is changing something over time. We can change color, shape, size, rotation. You can actually animate those characteristics over time in Anime Studio Pro. So what is keyframing exactly? It goes back to the glory days of animation in the late 30s, 40s, when folks like Disney would have lead animators that would draw key points in a storyline or key frames. Then the junior animators, their job was to simply draw all the sequential art between those key frames. We animate the same way now. We go to key points in our story, we go ahead and set some locations, some colors, whatever we're doing, and then the program figures out the rest, so it's really nice. We'll also be taking a very concerning look at a major bug that is in Anime Studio Pro 10 on the Mac platform. I know this will be released in a patch coming up, but currently if you have a Mac program and you're running with Anime Studio Pro 10, there are some features that do not work in this program yet. Doesn't mean you can't animate and get good results. Some of the fine-tuning features are missing, so we'll deal with that. Well, let's create our first keyframe animation. I have just a square drawn in here, and we want to move it from one side to the other. Really basic stuff. Down here in our timeline, we've got a little circle showing at timeline 0. This is a keyframe, or how Anime Studio Pro represents keyframes. If I step forward one frame, I'll be in the live animation area. Frame 0 is where you do all your creation, all your posing, rigging, all that stuff. And in fact, many of the tools, once you advance into the timeline, are no longer accessible. Our animation currently is 78 frames long. You can see the numbers here. Our marker is currently at 0 of 78 frames. This can be controlled also under the project settings when you open this up, amongst other things that we'll look at when we get to rendering. But we have our start frame and our end frame down here. This is important because if you have a longer sequence but only want to render a small portion of it in the middle, this is where you would go in and make those changes. All right, let's step forward one frame. I could grab my timeline marker and pull it forward, or I can use the little step icon in the transport controls. You're familiar with all these controls because they look like exactly what you would find on a DVR or something like that. But there's ones on the end. Little triangle with a dot. This is something called next keyframe. And as you get into more complex animations, instead of trying to precisely line up the cursor with an item so you can change it at a certain point in time, you just click this button and it takes you automatically to the keyframe immediately before or after where you are. Well, I am on frame 1. I'm going to come up to my transform tool right up here and simply click on the box. We'll see another dot that's been added down here, another keyframe, and this is where we discover the bug on the Mac platform that's not present on the PC platform. Great, we've got a keyframe. What exactly is being keyframed? Is it position? Is it scale? Is it rotation? Normally, you've got multiple icons down here to show you what's been going on. We don't have that ability here. This does not show up. And in fact, the motion graph right now on the Mac platform is completely useless. It doesn't show any information, doesn't show any of the multiple icons that show you whether you're changing a shape, changing a layer attribute, changing a color. I know this will be changed in an upcoming patch coming out, but right now, yeah, it's a little bit of a problem. Can still make great animations with the software, but it does make the job a little more work for the Mac users. So we've got our object click. And since we haven't changed anything, it's only plugged in the keyframe to the one item that it's thinking about, and that is, where is this shape? Let's move the timeline marker down, somewhere further down the field to like frame 60. Then I'm going to grab this shape, drag it over. I will rotate this, and maybe I'll go ahead and scale it a little bit. So we get a parallelogram. We can see another keyframe's been added. The rotation, the scale, and the position have all been keyframed right now. If we want to change any one of those, this is where we would use the back and forth of the keyframe editor to go ahead and quickly jump back and forth between these two items so we can line it up and not wind up having multiple keyframes right next to each other. So we'll scrub this and we see our motion in action. So that's a basic keyframe animation right now, just for motion, rotation, and skew. Best methods for working with keyframes is to do coarse movements first, fine movements second. It keeps you from inappropriately adding keyframes in an animation where you don't want them yet. Let me show you what I mean. I have created just a basic scene here with the imported pirate character that comes with Anime Studio Pro 10. Now let's say we want this character to lean to the left, keep looking to the right, but tilt her head back this way. Well, we're going to do the course animation first. Our character is standing like this at frame 0. That means if we don't change anything, it's going to also have that same position at frame 1. What I'll do is with my timeline marker, let's move this down to 60 again, and have our character lean to the left a little bit. We will tilt the head a bit, and there's our primary animation. So what do we fine tune now? You'll notice also that the hair was animating behind the character a little bit. In an earlier lesson, we had taken a look at Windows actions, creating things like smart bones. Well, that's exactly what's going on here, and there's a degree of animation that happens inside of smart bones or morphs that we work with. We can see all the smart bone actions here, eyes left, right. All these things can be edited from this point in time. But I digress. With this motion done, now it's time to go ahead and do the finer motions, like right around frame 36. We can go ahead and move the character's arm in. Maybe bring this other one forward just a little bit, and keep fine-tuning the motion until we're satisfied. So coarse movements first, fine movements second.